Welcome to Coffee with Closers. In this series, we interview top real estate producers that are out there making big things happen in the real estate industry. That way you can learn from their failures and their big wins so you can start winning more in your real estate business. Welcome to the show. Today we have Jimmy Murray here with the Lion Property Management Company. He is a property manager with over 400 units under contract. He started his own company and he's also a real estate investor. So today I want to dive into a topic that many investors and even some agents have been asking about, and that's the eviction moratorium. Jimmy, welcome to the show. I wanted to dive into this because a lot of people are wondering, like, hey, should I buy property right now? Can I even evict the tenant if they decide not to pay and abuse it?
Right.
Where do I stand as a landlord or a property owner or even an agent that just wants to go and invest in property for additional cash flow? Like, are your hands really tied up as people say they are, or is there more to it?
So this is like the elephant in the room.
Yes.
So before, the largest excuse that I would hear as to why people would not buy rental property was, well, what do I do when I get the call that there's a leak at 2 a.m.?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what I always heard. And honestly, it took 3 years for me to get the first, my toilet's leak in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. 3 years, huh?
Fortunately, there was a huge UFC fight that night, so I was up. So it was good. It was good. It worked out.
Nice.
Fortunate. But that was like the excuse that I always heard. So now the big excuse is, well, I can't evict tenants. And honestly, it's state by state. So
Okay.
the original eviction moratorium was pushed through the CARES Act. So when the CARES Act came through, this is, I want to say like early 2020. Sometime in March or April, they pushed through the CARES Act, where literally, if you had a federally funded or federally insured loan, so FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those types of loans, you could not evict a tenant prior to July, I think it was July 27, 2020.
Okay.
So you couldn't even send a demand notice asking for payment of rent. That's scary.
That is.
Right? So you have a tenant that is reading the headlines and he's like, all right, I'm good. From March through the end of July, like I'm going to put my feet up, I'm going to get my stimmies and I'm good. I'm not going to pay anything. So honestly, that did happen. Once July opened up, and that was kind of at the national level, then it kind of shifts on state and local level. So in Rhode Island, they opened the courts back up in May of 2020. So now you just had to pay attention because in order for the CARES Act to kick in, the tenant would have to sign an affidavit or a declaration. And this is still in play today. Like with the CDC eviction moratorium, they can still sign an affidavit.
Okay.
So Massachusetts, for a prerogative between Massachusetts and Rhode Island, where we manage property. Rhode Island, the courts have been open since May of 2020. In Massachusetts, we're sitting here in August of 2021, the courts are still not open. They're leveraging Zoom. And it's a completely different landscape. Where like, if you sneeze the wrong way in court in Massachusetts, my attorney is probably not gonna like that I say this, but if you sneeze the wrong way in court, they will grant the tenants 3 to 6 months of free rent in Massachusetts. So this is where, not to get political, but the difference between like a red state and a blue state really come into play. You kind of want to be somewhere in between, or be in one of the red states that have more conservative laws that protect the landlords, right? It's not really picking one political side or the other, it's really protecting your investment.
Yes.
Because we've been fortunate in the units that we manage in Massachusetts, but there's one owner that I can think of off the top of my head that, purchased a building literally a month before COVID, and there was a tenant who got away without paying rent for a year and a half. And kept getting emergency stays through the court system.
Wow.
And the worst part is this tenant, I don't know if you guys know this is kind of like a golden nugget. If you have a tenant that is on Social Security disability income, even if you get a judgment against them for past due rent, you can't even send it to collections because they're disabled. So some people will say, hey, listen, I want to rent to that tenant on SSDI because it's guaranteed income. But if they choose not to pay, you can still evict them, but you're never going to get any of the money that they choose not to pay you. So that's something to think about, right? But honestly, the eviction moratorium has been a consistently shifting landscape. So if you guys are kind of still on the fence, or if you're trying to figure out, all right, I want to buy real estate, how do I navigate this? Reach out to a local eviction attorney. Mm-hmm. Some of them may give you a couple of sound bites or invite you to their seminars where they're coaching their clients and other local investors what's going on. The other big thing is join a local RIA. Real Estate Investment Association, RIA. We have a local real estate investment group, so that's where I kind of got thrown off.
locally.
But honestly, those are going to be some of your top local investors that literally you can buy a beer with before the meeting or after the meeting and really, bump elbows and learn from these local folks who are actively doing this. A lot of the older guys think it's cool when those younger folks are, kind of wet behind the ears. Newer investors come into the room to kind of teach you what they didn't know when they started. So I know that like eviction moratorium is like that really scary kind of phrase they use on the news to scare the crap out of you, but the savvy guys are still buying, or savvy investors are still buying real estate. They're still actively doing it. They're just shifting their approach to protect themselves, by conducting more due diligence up front, or really trying to figure out the tenant mix of a building when they do buy it. So join your local RIA and try to ask these old timers, buy them a beer, buy them a glass of scotch, and pick their brains to see how they're navigating it.
I like that. Now, just as a follow-up question to that, someone that's more analytical, they might say, hey, this guy got a ton of units under management. How many actual problems are you seeing with this out of the, because you have scale, so you should be able to tell the numbers. On a rough percentage, is it 10% of people that are having trouble with it, 5%, 30%, 40%? What are you seeing out there?
Right. So for numbers, throughout COVID, we've been between 450 to 490 doors under management. The highest month, we filed 17 evictions.
Wow.
That was the worst month during COVID, 17 evictions. But we also took a very active approach to working with the tenants.
Yes.
And I can talk a little bit about that, and hopefully you guys can relay that across your own portfolio. Hopefully we never get as deep into coronavirus as we kind of were before.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to COVID, a normal month was between 4 to 6 evictions, so about 1%. Okay. So then it jumped, to almost 3% or above 3%. The active approach that we took. So our standard approach is that by the 5th of the month, if we don't receive payment, I'll have our one of our assistants reach out, and they'll call every single tenant to try to set up a payment plan, just to establish the lines of communication. And then we'll reach out again between the 10th and the 12th. We'll typically send a text or a follow-up email. So phone call, text, email, trying to leverage whatever communication channel the tenant likes best. And then by the 16th, we will send that 5-day demand in Rhode Island to start the process. Massachusetts is a little bit different. We send the demand earlier.
Okay.
So honestly, in Massachusetts, you have to serve it via constable, but you can send a demand on the 2nd of the month. That's super aggressive. You can.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise that, but just because it could be in transit.
Yeah.
Right. But during COVID, we increased the level of touches, and the big thing was we reached out to the tenants saying, "Hey, we recognize that people are having some financial challenges. We're here to work with you. Just communicate with us."
Yes.
So if you lost your job, reach out on a weekly basis and tell us like, "Hey, lost my job. I'm trying to acquire funds through Safe Harbor," or, I applied to a couple jobs this week, and just continue to establish those lines of communication. Mm-hmm. And we'll work with you. Or, "Hey, I lost my job for 2 to 3 weeks. Now I wasn't able to make a rent payment, but I'm going to make a catch-up payment of $200 on this day," and then establish that payment plan. Say, "Hey, listen, as long as you meet this payment plan that we talked about, we're not going to go to court."
Yes.
And show them that you're willing to work with them. Show them that you're human too.
Yes.
That was like the big thing that we communicated with our tenants. Hey, we're human. Mm-hmm. We're here to work with you. We're not going to be that big bad property manager that just continues to knock on your door like the big bad wolf. We're going to actively work with you to help you acquire these funds if you do need help. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think that's what helped us still maintain a high level of rent collection.
That makes sense. Okay. So, you guys handled it extremely well, but even if you didn't handle it as well, it's still not as overblown as people think.
Yeah, I think people really blow it out of the water, but honestly, like what we saw, I think it all goes back to having a thorough screening process, right? So our standard basis of placing a tenant is that their gross income needs to be 3 times 1 month's rent.
I've heard that.
Now, when I see in the news, they're like, "Hey, most people are paying 50 to 60% of their gross income as rent." I would say that those are probably less educated landlords. Mm-hmm. And this is where we developed this rule. Like, you're going to read it across multiple real estate blogs, books, websites, whatever it may be. They use that 33% rule. So 33% of your gross income is what you qualify for in rent. Where that comes from, this is a great Investopedia term. It comes from the 28-36 rule. So banks historically, before we get these really aggressive Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac products and local housing agency products, they used to underwrite based on a 20-36 rule. So they would look at your gross income, and they would only allow your monthly housing payment to be 28% of your gross income, and they would only allow your total debt to income ratio not exceed 36% of your gross income.
Wow.
Because you're gonna figure, like, you're probably paying anywhere from 20 to 30% to Uncle Sam.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, 28% is gonna be for housing, and then the remainder is gonna be whatever you choose for it to be, your car, groceries for your family, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So our rule is built off of that historic banking rule of the 28-36.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I've even heard up to 4 times the monthly rent and income.
Yeah, so
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, so I guess the only thing is you start to press for 4 times, because one of my first tenants, he was like 5 times. He rents a $900 a month apartment and pulls in a brand new Jaguar. This kid used you can't tell, like, this was a challenging tenant for me. He always, I joke that your best tenants are always gonna pay rent on time on the first. Like some of your worst, they'll pay rent on time, but it's the other extracurricular activities that may drive you insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as you approach that 4 times, in theory, it sounds really good, right? Not a bad thing, because they have that financial security. You may have higher vacancy rates.
Because they're gonna move.
Well, now they can qualify for either a larger apartment or they can go buy a house.
True.
So it's like that really delicate balance of the scales tipping. Now, maybe you get that single
Sure.
guy that makes 4 times and he never wants to go anywhere. That's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always more of an art than a science, and this is what we coach our clients through.
I like that. That's actually some really good tips in this segment. So if you have questions about any of this, definitely drop it in the comment section below. We'll do our best to get to it. And smash the like button, hit the subscribe button for more real estate content. And thanks so much for watching.